Competence gets praised while politics gets promoted. You feel it before you admit it. You finish the work, fix the mistakes, answer the message, carry the dead weight, and still the room bends towards someone lighter than you. Your jaw locks when they speak with authority you never borrowed. Your hands go still when your work becomes their platform. You thought usefulness would protect you. It does not. It only makes you easier to place, easier to call at the last minute, and easier to keep below the glass. Machiavelli understood this long before officers learned to hide it under polite language. The person who keeps the machine running is not automatically the person who controls the machine. Once your value is defined as service instead of position, they stop seeing you as a future equal and start seeing you as reliable infrastructure. That is the trap. You are not being overlooked because your work is invisible. You are being fixed into a role by people who benefit when your labor stays louder than your name. At work, competence does not speak for itself. It speaks for whoever stands closest to the credit, the meeting, the manager, the narrative, the timing, and the final retelling. That is why the hardest worker in the building can feel strangely powerless. You are not in a pure merit system. You are inside a human system, and human systems do not reward value first. They reward readable status, emotional control, alliance, and the ability to stop your usefulness from being mistaken for obedience. Everything starts with the same bad trade. You think doing more creates safety. In reality, doing more without changing your position only hardens your assigned role. The office does not read endless output as hidden leadership. It reads it as available capacity. You know the scene. A deadline slips, someone freezes, the task lands on your desk because you can do it fast. You tell yourself it is temporary. You clean it up once, then again, then a third time. Soon your speed is not treated like a skill. It is treated like a public utility. People stop asking whether the work should be yours. They only ask whether you can handle it by 5. Your chest tightens, but you still say yes because the fast yes feels safer than the political no. That is how competence becomes a cage. The more calmly you absorb extra weight, the more the office learns your edge is movable. Managers love this because it solves their immediate problem. Colleagues love it because it lowers the cost of their disorder. You may even love it for a while because usefulness can mimic importance. But importance changes your position. Usefulness often only increases your load. This is why burnout in political workplaces feels humiliating, not just exhausting. You are not only tired, you start realizing that your best trait has been converted into convenience for people who never intended to move you upward. They did not reward the pattern because it was excellent. They rewarded it because it was easy to consume. Then the trap becomes easier to hide. You confuse visibility with authority. Your work is seen, but your position is not. A lot of competent people live inside this illusion. They think, if everyone sees what I do, the right person will eventually connect the dots. But offices are not moral cameras. Work does not arrive with its meaning attached. It arrives inside interpretation. Who framed it? Who presented it? Who attached their voice to the result? Who made it legible to power? If you produce the result and someone else narrates the result, you created value for their status, not yours. You have felt that sting in meetings. The idea leaves your mouth in a rough form, lands quietly, then returns 10 minutes later with a smoother voice and better posture. Now everyone nods. Nothing changed except the carrier. You smile because protesting would look petty. Your throat tightens because your body knows what happened before your mind allows itself to name it. They did not defeat your idea. They absorbed your authorship. This is not always theft in the dramatic sense. Sometimes it is simpler. They summarize what you built. They forward what you solved. They present your clarity with their own confidence wrapped around it. The office often promotes the person who can package value upward, not the one who quietly generates it downward. So if your labor is visible but your authorship is weak, you become a supply line for stronger personalities. And once that pattern starts, it spreads. The manager begins to remember them as strategic and you as dependable. Dependable sounds flattering until you hear what it really means in a hierarchy. It means useful without threat. It means present without claim. It means you are trusted to carry weight, but not yet imagined as the one who decides where the weight should go. Another weakness follows. You think being the least political person in the office keeps you clean. In reality, it often keeps you undefended. There is a childish fantasy buried inside many competent adults. If I stay fair, direct, and focused on the work, the system will eventually respect me. Sometimes it will. Most of the time it will simply classify you. You become the one who can be leaned on without complication. You become the one who tells the truth too early, gives context too freely, answers too honestly, and assumes everyone else is operating with the same straightforward intent. Some of them are not evil, they are just adaptive. They notice who can be delayed, who can be loaded, who can be flattered, who can be blamed with minimal resistance. Political people do not always attack with aggression. Often they attack with timing. They speak after your work is done. They step in when the room wants a story. They stay vague when risk is high and specific when credit appears. Meanwhile, you are still trying to win with evidence alone. That is why competence without framing feels strangely lonely. You know you are carrying more than the people above you. You can prove it in documents, emails, outcomes, late nights, corrected failures. But proof is not position. A hierarchy does not bend just because you are correct. It bends when the right people feel your correction as force, risk, alliance, or consequence. This is the part good workers hate. The office does not only measure contribution, it measures what happens around your contribution. Does your name travel with the result? Do people hesitate before misusing your time? Does your absence create pressure on someone with rank or only more work for you later? Do others picture you as a peer or as a stabilizer? These are political questions, and refusing them does not make them disappear. It only means other people answer them for you. Soon your body enters the negotiation. You think frustration is private, but the office reads your body long before it hears your argument. When you keep carrying more than your role, resentment starts looking for exits. It comes out in clipped replies, over-explaining, visible fatigue, tense silence, little flashes of contempt, rushed corrections, the dead face in meetings, the extra force in an email that should have stayed simple. You may think these moments prove how much pressure you are under. The office often reads them differently. They read instability, they read need, they read someone who is starting to understand the game too late. That is cruel, but it is real. The person who loses position is often not the one doing less. It is the one whose body announces that they feel trapped. Once they smell trapped, they stop negotiating with you as an equal. They start managing your reactions. They delay the hard conversation because they know you will take the task anyway. They soften the language because they know your standards will finish the job. They call you valuable while feeding you the conditions that keep you dependent on that word. This is why disciplined workers sometimes get more respect after they become colder. Not because coldness is noble, but because calm refusal changes the reading. When your face stops pleading for fairness, people lose easy access to your labor. When your no arrives without explanation, your role becomes harder to script. When you stop bleeding your disappointment into every interaction, they have less material to organize you around. Emotional control is not self-betrayal in this environment. It is perimeter control. It stops your frustration from becoming management data. Then comes the hope that ruins careers. You tell yourself that the truth will become undeniable. But truth inside institutions usually arrives only after leverage does. Look at how promotions often happen. Not when the best worker reaches some sacred threshold of merit, but when the organization fears losing them, needs to retain them, needs their stability during change, or finally sees that another manager is claiming their output. In other words, recognition often comes late, after political pressure appears. The system does not wake up because it has become just. It wakes up because your current arrangement becomes costly for someone with power. You can feel this in the tone shift. For months you ask for scope, title, support, decision rights, cleaner boundaries. Nothing moves. Then you go quiet, stop rescuing avoidable messes, decline one invisible task too many, or take a serious outside conversation, and suddenly people want to discuss your growth. That is not an accident. They did not suddenly discover your value. They discovered your value with consequences attached. This is one of the ugliest truths in adult life. Need gets your labor used. Leverage gets your labor priced. Until the office can imagine losing something by keeping you small, many of them will keep calling your sacrifice maturity. They will call your patience professionalism. They will call your silence reliability. They will call your overfunctioning leadership potential. They will name the pattern in whatever language lets them keep consuming it. And this is where many competent people break themselves. They keep trying to become undeniable through volume, more work, more availability, more polish, more proof. But in political environments, excess proof often lowers your price because it signals that you are still applying for a position you are already occupying in everyone else's mind. The worker, the fixer, the adult in the room. The one who will absorb it. The office has no reason to rewrite that identity while it remains profitable. Most people answer this by reaching for the wrong cure. It is not. The answer is to stop donating power through unprotected competence. That starts with changing what your effort says. If every emergency can reach you, your time has no border. If every broken task can become yours, your role has no edge. If every good result can travel without your voice attached to it, your value has no owner. You do not fix this by becoming less capable. You fix it by making capability arrive with shape, sequence, and consequence. Sometimes that means finishing less publicly and framing more deliberately. Sometimes it means sending the update before the meeting instead of hoping someone mentions your work. Sometimes it means declining rescue work that does not change your position. Sometimes it means asking the dangerous question in the calmest possible voice. Is this part of my role, or are we filling a gap without naming it? Is my name attached to this decision, or am I only carrying the execution? Who is presenting this upward? What moves if I stop holding this together? Those questions scare people because they convert your labor back into structure. They force the office to face what it was enjoying for free. And the moment free labor starts asking for edges, titles, ownership, sequence, or visibility, everyone who benefited from your blur starts acting surprised. That surprise is information. It tells you who liked your excellence and who liked your compliance. The internal trap is the role you got rewarded for early. In many workplaces, you are trained to perform the admirable mask of the strong helper, the calm fixer, the person who never makes the room harder. But every mask that wins approval also carries a hidden tax. If you live inside it too long, you start protecting the image that is costing you your life. You keep being the capable one because that role brought safety, praise, and identity. Meanwhile, the self underneath it grows angrier, smaller, and harder to hear. That is why this problem does not end with tactics alone. It also requires an internal break. You have to become willing to disappoint the version of you that was built for institutional approval. You have to survive the guilt of not rescuing every timeline. You have to survive being called difficult by people who were only comfortable when your competence had no boundaries. You have to survive the silence that follows when you stop making other people's disorder look normal. That silence matters. At first it feels like danger. Your stomach drops. Your hands want to move. You want to explain, soften, help, prove, reassure. Do not rush to heal that silence. In many offices, silence is the first moment your old role stops functioning automatically. It is the gap where a different reading can begin. There is another layer people miss because it feels too petty to matter. The office watches how others treat you. Status is never built only in your private exchange with a manager. It spreads sideways before it settles upward. Think about what happens when a coworker interrupts you and nothing follows. Another coworker sees it. When someone drops a last-minute task on you at 4:47 and you absorb it with one strained laugh, somebody else sees that too. When your calendar gets treated like open land, when your expertise gets requested but not consulted, when your corrections arrive without your name attached, the office is collecting a pattern. People do not need a formal memo to learn your position. They learn it from repetition. They learn it from what happens to you without consequence. That is why one tolerated insult at work is rarely just one insult. It becomes permission. The late request becomes normal. The missing credit becomes normal. The casual interruption becomes normal. The meeting where you explain and someone else concludes becomes normal. Soon even decent people start cooperating with a picture of you that you never agreed to, not because they studied doctrine. Because social life trains itself around the path of least resistance. If you want to see your real rank, do not listen to praise. Watch the friction. Watch what happens when people need something from you, when they disagree with you, when your time is full, when a deadline is at risk, when a senior person enters the room. That is where your position becomes visible. Praise is cheap because it costs them nothing. Friction is expensive because it reveals what they actually think they can do with you. This is also why private resentment rarely changes anything. You can go home furious and still return to the same role the next morning because your anger was never translated into consequence. The office does not respond to what you feel in private. It responds to what becomes operational in public. A cleaner boundary, a slower yes, a visible ownership line, a question that names the transfer, a refusal to let your labor move upward without your voice attached to it. Once you understand that, you stop waiting for fairness to arrive as a mood. You start making misreadings more difficult. You stop letting the whole building participate in a lie about your role. The goal is not to become theatrical. It is to become expensive in the right way, not emotionally expensive, not chaotic, structurally expensive, harder to assign without naming, harder to use without consequence, harder to summarize without authorship, harder to push into invisible labor and still call it opportunity. When that shift happens, something strange occurs. Some people pull away. They were never attached to you. They were attached to access. Others become colder because your new edges force them to reveal their true position. And a few finally begin treating you like an equal because equality often begins the moment your usefulness is no longer easy to harvest. So stop asking whether competence matters. It does, but competence without position is fuel. Competence without authorship is supply. Competence without boundaries is management candy for people who need one adult to carry 10 hidden failures. Your work is not the problem. The unprotected shape of your work is. You do not need to become cruel. You do not need to become fake. You do not need to worship office politics like a religion, but you do need to stop acting as if clean effort automatically creates clean outcomes in a hierarchy. It does not. The office is full of people who know exactly how much labor they can take from someone who still wants to be seen as good. Do not hand them your future in exchange for being called reliable. Become the operator who can work, speak, refuse, and be credited in the same motion. Become the operator whose calm is not obedience. Become the operator who no longer confuses being needed with being respected. That is when competence stops feeding the machine and starts changing your position. Subscribe if you want the next layer of status, control, and approval without the self-help sugar.